All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. We are super excited that David Childers, the president of Keeping Current Matters, is here speaking with us today. First, we want to thank the Prep Board and Prep for allowing us to tie this in with this meeting. So thank you so much for that. Also want to thank Tony Robeson for bringing extra coffee and Steve Wilson for bringing extra donuts. So thanks for helping us out. Okay. I want to welcome Carl Spiteri and his referral partners. He is for our Benchmark branch down in UTC. So thank you, Carl, for joining us.
Thank you all for allowing us into the I-15 quarter. Thanks for coming. We'll enjoy the show because you're in for a great speaker.
So once again, everybody, thank you so much for showing up in force, and this is awesome turnout. So my daughter, Kayliana, and Dean's daughter, Shelby, back there helping us out. Thank you so much. But so go ahead and please eat as much as you can. I don't know how much we have left. If we run out, that's great. I'm going to get out of the way, though. David Childers and Keeping Current Matters and the history between Benchmark and David is phenomenal. He's supported us for years, and we're super excited that he's here. So this is real-time information you can use. When you walk out this door, it will make you a better, more informed person today, so in the real estate field. We have the slides, and this is being recorded, so if you want it later, just contact one of us, and we'll get it out to you. So, David, we're going to get out of your way. Thank you so much for coming.
Am I on? Am I good? All right. Thank you so much. Dean and Mitch and Carl, I am grateful for the opportunity just to be here for a few minutes. How many people, Connie, you asked, how many people follow Keeping Current Matters? A few. If you don't, go and follow us. We want you to do that. And Connie, I learned something new. I didn't know there was a price beautification, but now I know that. I am grateful for it. So I'm excited to be here for a number of different reasons. Mitch, you mentioned it. Benchmark has supported what we do at Keeping Current Matters from day one. And that means the world, right? Relationships in this business matter. You know, it's fun to be in this room, and I get a chance to do these from time to time, and you can just feel the energy in here, and you can feel that people care about each other. And we're in a market right now where you need relationships. You absolutely do, and they matter. They matter for encouragement, they matter for motivation, they matter for information, they matter for all the reasons. And I love being at any meeting where you start off with a pledge. I got to tell you, I got a chance to do this from time to time, and I was in a meeting about a year ago, and they started off with the pledge. They didn't have the words up, and they said, "David, why don't you lead us?" And I'm just grateful this morning that you didn't ask me to lead it. Okay, because I froze right there in that moment. Probably one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, and I'm like, they probably think I'm some kind of loser who doesn't know the pledge. I'm like, I don't know what to say. But I'm grateful for that and grateful to be here. So what we want to take about the next 45 minutes to an hour and talk about is what's really happening in this market. My goal is to give you all of that information. I'm going to give you all of these slides. You can use them anywhere you want, in a conversation with somebody, in a social media post, in a video that you're going to make any way that you want. Okay, these are yours, and we're going to talk about things that are happening right now in real estate. I'm going to bring a national perspective to this conversation. The reason for that is, anytime you work with someone and they turn on the news or they have a news app open, they are educated at the national level, okay? It's critically important that you bring your local market opinion to the conversation, obviously. So I'm going to talk about national, you're going to bring the local, and that's really what this market requires. But if I were to anchor our time in one place right now for the next kind of 45 minutes, it would be right here with this quote from Donald Miller. He wrote a book called Building a Story Brand. If you've never read that book and you're a reader, I would highly recommend it. He said, people do not follow the best leaders, they follow the ones they can understand the easiest. And there is no doubt that that is true. There's also, in this book, there's a point that he makes that there's one time where the brain will not allow itself to daydream. That one time is when it's involved in a story. Okay? Whenever you're involved in a story, your brain's not allowed to daydream. Any other time it can daydream. You know, this thing's kind of falling off, but you snag me a little tape right there, yeah. But when the brain is involved in a story, it will not allow itself to daydream. So here's what we're going to do. I want to ask you to do a couple of things. First, grab something. I think a lot of people have something to write with already. If you got that, pull that out. John's going to be watching. Didn't write down his number, but thank you, sir.
I do loans too.
He does. But you're going to want to write something down, okay? And I'm going to give you something to write down here really quick that I want you to. I also want you to grab your phone, because what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a couple pictures of these slides, because you're going to be in a conversation with someone. You're going to say, I was here and I heard this, and you'll be able to answer that question, okay? Because I'm going to cover a lot of things this morning. But here's what I would write down right now. The question that I would ask is, from your perspective, do I have a relevant market opinion based upon fact? Do I have a relevant market opinion based upon fact? A lot of times when I get a chance to do presentations like this or a webinar or something, I'll start off and I'll ask people that question. The origin of that question, Dean, Mitch, and Carl, came from Jim McMahon, the president of Benchmark Mortgage, of understanding, do I have an opinion based upon fact? I'm not going to debate with you that there are not a ton of opinions in our business. There are a ton of people that think this, or they were told that, or their uncle said this, or whatever it is, but they're very, very rarely based upon fact. Okay? So do I have that? Do I have a relevant market opinion based upon fact? Because we're going to talk about facts today. Okay, I'm going to give you all the facts about three of the biggest topics that I believe are hitting us as a business right now. Okay, you're going to want to take pictures of these slides, and we're going to kind of spend our time right here. What's happening with interest rates? Anybody have a question on that? Huh? What are experts saying about home prices? And what's the biggest question right now? Anybody have an idea what the biggest question is right now from a consumer's perspective? That's it right there. Should I buy a home right now? Is it going to crash? What's going to happen? Somebody said, I think you said relatively low interest rates relative to time.
When I got into the mortgage business, interest rates were 16%.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah. Two facts about this market I'll give you really quickly. And you're right. I would offer you that there's something happened yesterday. How many people have been in the business less than 20 years? Raise your hand. Okay, so I'm going to call it half the room. Something happened yesterday that hasn't happened in 20 years. The average 30-year fix in this country went above 7% on average. That last time that happened was in March of 2002. Now, a 7% interest rate is not the problem, I would agree. It is the rapid rise in interest rates this year that has caused problems. Two facts about this market right now. First one, there has never been a year in real estate where inside of the year the interest rate has doubled. We got that. Second thing, this has been the fastest rise in 50 years in interest rates. So if you ever wonder why people are like, I don't know what's going to happen, it's because they haven't ever seen it. That's the bottom line right now. Biggest question, should I buy a home? So let's start with interest rates. There was a book written in the late 70s that I love. It's called Leadership as an Art by a man named Max Dupree. Anybody ever read that book or seen that book? It's a phenomenal book. The first line of it says, the leader's job is to define reality. This is reality in our business right now, right here. This is a look at the average 30-year fixed every week in this country starting out the first week of January, and they've gone straight up. We just passed yesterday, and Thursday comes out every week from Freddie Mac, the weekly monitor of interest rates, above 7%. And certainly to the lender that you're talking to, I would expect to be quoted somewhere in that range, but that's looking in the rearview mirror. So how do we give people perspective? How do we give people good advice given that on the average mortgage payment in this country, which the average home in this country sells for $360,000. I saw the prices that were up there. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm like, man, that's added on average about $1,000 to the average mortgage payment in this country. Here, certainly that's multiple of that. And it's real pain. You know, about a year ago, I was in San Francisco and was rushing away from an event, trying to catch a flight. We were running late and got caught in traffic and got to the airport and just barely made it onto the flight, got seated and, you know, kind of taxied out, and the pilot took off. And it's kind of a stormy day, and as we took off and we were going up through, I guess, the storm and the clouds, you could tell, I'm not a pilot, but you could tell the pilot was kind of revving the engines and doing whatever they do, and, you know, kind of bumping and all that. And we got up through it, and it was, you know, beautiful. Like, you get through those and you can see the sky and all that. And the pilot came over on the loudspeaker and he said this, and I've never been on a flight where he ever said this before. He said, "That right there took about everything this plane has." Those were his words. And I thought, I could have gone the rest of this flight with never hearing that. And everybody in the plane started to freak out. And he said after that, here's what he said next. He said, "I've informed the flight attendants," we're going down to Orange County, "I've informed the flight attendants to be prepared for an aggressive landing." And I'm like, man, I'm not a pilot, but I don't love hearing aggressive landing. I don't love that. If I were to sort of encapsulate this market and explain it to you, Jerome Powell, who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve, is flying this plane. We don't get a chance to see what he sees. He sees a scenario where he says, if we keep doing what we're doing, this plane's going to blow up. And he's taken this plane, which is called the economy, and real estate's in it, and he's taking it on a nosedive. And everybody feels it, and everybody's freaking out. And there are 4 possible scenarios in that. One is you take that plane down, you get to a lower altitude, and you fly it, and you're good. There's a rough land, you know, he said aggressive approach, and there's a rough landing. Have you heard them talk about the Fed, like, hey, is it going to be a smooth landing? Is it going to be a rough landing? So you could have a smooth or rough landing, or you could crash the plane. Those are the 4 options that you have at that moment. And there are a lot of people right now that feel about real estate, this plane is going to crash. Let me be honest with you. I don't believe that, and I'm going to prove that to you here in just a minute and show you some facts. We're somewhere between a soft landing and an aggressive rough landing in real estate. I believe over the next 12 months, the ground's going to shake a little bit, but we're all going to be okay. You're going to need to be connected. You're going to need to be informed. You're going to need to have the facts and truth about this market, and you're going to need to be a professional. You're going to need to look at people and say, okay, here's what you should do in this scenario given your situation. We want to help people make great decisions. If you were to come back with me to Richmond, Virginia, and be in our office, we have a wall inside of our office that says we believe every family should feel confident when buying and selling a home. And that's what drives us at Keeping Current Matters. But if I'm giving good information to my clients and I'm you about interest rates, here's what I would say. First thing, Mark Fleming, while mortgage rates are expected to continue to drift higher, much of the rapid increase in rates is likely behind us. Now, let's hope that he's right about that, okay? But this is all about the fight against inflation. One thing you can always remind your clients of, or if you know this, inflation is the enemy of long-term interest rates. Okay, as long as you see high inflation, you're going to see high interest rates. And so what are experts saying? They're saying, you know what? As they continue to fight inflation, rates will go a little bit higher. You can add your personal opinion in there. I'll give you mine. Inflation is here and it's not going away tomorrow. That's the truth right now. But if we continue on this, what is that going to do? These calls for recession come up, right? We talked about the soft landing or the aggressive landing. The Fed does too much, sends us into recession. The calls for recession in this country have been growing. This is a survey from the Wall Street Journal. They go out every quarter just about, and they've done a couple more this year because it's been just a different year, and said, when do you believe a recession will hit this country? 63% of the experts surveyed in this study say within the next year. I would say by the middle of next year. Now there's this debate, is it 2 consecutive quarters? What technically is a recession? You can follow Keeping Current Matters. We've done extensive coverage on that, and you'd have to go all the way back to the 40s to find a recession that isn't 2 consecutive quarters, but that is a question that people ask a lot of times. But really, what would a recession mean to our business? That's the question that you want to ask. CEOs say, you know what, this is likely to be a mild and short recession. Now we'll see as things go through, but you know, in the modern economy post-war, the average recession in this country lasts about 10 months. Short and mild would be somewhere between 6 and 8 months. But if you look at what KPMG, what the Wall Street Journal, what all of these organizations are forecasting, is that a recession will come, and it should be short and mild, okay? Now, what does that mean? Anybody seen this graphic from KCM? A recession doesn't mean falling home prices. I'm not saying that that means that's always what's going to happen. I'm not saying that that doesn't mean that home prices couldn't fall this year. But if you go back to the early 80s, we did a study on every recession and said what happens to home prices. 4 out of the 6 recessions, homes actually appreciated. 2, they depreciated. Once, I'd say, you know, minimally in the early 90s. What everybody remembers is 2008. And if we're honest with ourselves in this business, the last couple of years have felt a lot like that. And certainly if you're not in this business, people are like, it feels a lot like that. People are like, just buy the home, just get it, let's just figure it out, and it doesn't matter. And oh, by the way, what's gonna happen with all of this? Now there are massive differences between today and 2008, and I won't go into all of those today. But what does a recession ultimately mean? A recession means falling mortgage rates. Again, if you go back and look at every recession in this country, going back to the early 80s, every single time we've hit a recession, the average interest rate from the peak to the trough has dropped. So, what's our relevant market opinion based upon fact? Well, here's where we are today. We're at, you know, low 7s. Experts are saying they're probably going to go higher, and then we're going to go into a recession and we're going to see some relief. That's how you start to guide a client in that. Now, here's what I know. That's the path these normally take. What I don't know is timing. I don't know if we're talking 6 weeks or 6 months. I can guarantee you we're not talking 6 years. I can tell you that. But the question is going to be about timing. So again, I can apply my personal relevant market opinion based upon fact, use all this information, grab this information from wherever you get your information from. We do it for people, and you're welcome to use our stuff, and we'd love to have you as a member, but find it. You have to have it, because that question is going to be asked, and it's going to be answered as, I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. Or, let me show you how this typically happens in our business. We have a time right now, probably better than any I've seen outside of COVID, where we can create credibility with clients. There wasn't really a need for credibility in the last couple of years, because it was like, can you get the house for us? That's all we really cared about. But we have a chance right now to create certainty and ultimately credibility with our clients. We're going to do some Q&A at the end, but any questions about that? We can have a conversation. You can ask questions too as we go through this. Any questions on that? So the next one, we jump to, what are experts saying about home prices? First quote we'll start with. For those bearish folks eagerly awaiting home prices to crash, you'll have to keep waiting. As much as demand is pulling back, supply is as well, reducing the downward pressure on prices in the short run. So that was a fear. That's what, if you go out, it's hard to find a reputable economist saying, hey, home prices are going to crash. You do find some people on YouTube that say the world's going to end and the homes are going to, lose all their value. And good news is they have something to sell you to help you get through it, and you can do that. But no doubt when you look at it, there are a couple things that we don't know the impact of right now. One, we don't know the impact in real estate of everybody in this country that has an interest rate below 3%. We just don't know the impact of it. I believe real estate's driven by life events, having a baby, getting a job, all the things that you know about what causes people to buy. But there are a lot of people that'll say, we're good. We're good. We may add on to this house, we may do something different because we've got an interest rate here that we like, okay? But we're not seeing a massive amount of supply come to the market. I haven't looked at the numbers here locally, but I don't sense there's a massive amount of supply coming because people aren't selling right now. They're like, we've got something, we don't know where we would go. People are transacting, but we're not seeing this flood of inventory coming to the market. Now, if we, again, compared to 2008, we saw that for a lot of different reasons, and we can talk about that, but not the case today. So what are experts saying about prices? This is the latest look at home price forecast for next year from the 6 experts that we follow. MBA, Home Price Expectation Survey, NAR, Freddie, Fannie, Ivy Zelman. And you see there's kind of a combination here of 3 here calling for depreciation, 3 calling for appreciation. If you were to ask me nationally, we're going to be in some sort of a flat market next year. Maybe up a little bit, maybe down a little bit. Are there going to be some nuances in markets where you see a little bit more action probably here in Southern California? No doubt. But nationally, that will be what the market will look like. A very, very flat market. Not back during the global financial crisis, the housing recession, homes lost almost 20% value. Nowhere near that. The question back then was, hey, not are you going to lose money if you sell your house? The question back then was, how much are you going to lose? Remember that? Anybody was in the business back then, like, how much are you going to lose? The question today is, you might not make as much. Those are the differences, the stark differences between today and the crisis. If you look at what banks are forecasting, it's a little bit different. Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, Moody's, Morgan Stanley, all forecasting depreciation. Now, I will tell you, there is a bias in forecasting right now, very much so. Anybody that deals with publicly traded builders is forecasting depreciation. Anybody that focuses on existing home sales is generally forecasting appreciation. And that makes sense right now. I'll tell you what these banks have in common too, and I'll give you an example from Wells Fargo. They're forecasting depreciation going into next year, but appreciation the following year. This is critically important to understand. It's important to understand for a couple of reasons. This one is probably the biggest point that I would make today. While there may be little statistical difference between a small positive number and a small negative number, there are often huge differences in how they impact behavior. So as I stand here and talk about this today, my challenge to you would be, how do you see the market? How do you see the market? What do you believe about it? Because that's going to determine how you respond. You see this market going down, you see this market staying flat, you see this market going up. That's why a meeting like this, staying energized, staying informed, staying connected, I believe for the next 12 months will be more critical than ever. No doubt. Because the impact of real estate, we have a chance to write that story. Because the story is going to be told. I will guarantee you. It's already being told by the media. And it's not favorable to us. I want to be honest. The job of the news today is to get you to watch more news. It's not to inform people. Here's why this is important. During the global financial crisis, home prices depreciated for 5 years. We're talking about something happening in the next 12 months that even in some of the most effective markets, top end of forecast or maybe 5, maybe 10% depreciation in very, very few markets. I've only seen one study that said 3 markets would be somewhere between 5 and 10% in this country. Because there's not the inventory. The only time you lose money in real estate is when you have to sell. There's a term that you'll hear, maybe you've heard it. Anybody heard it, downside sticky? Has anybody heard that term relative to home prices? What downside sticky means is if there aren't forced sales, prices remain, they stay. They don't drop. What happened in 2008? Everybody was forced to sell and prices dropped. There was a time where those of us that were in the business at that time remember that. It's kind of like, okay, things are going to get a little bit better. And 2008 it was like, all right, 12 months of this, we're going to be good. 2009 we're like, all right, in the next year we're totally going to be good. 2010 came along, we're like, we might all die. I mean, this might not work out, and you kind of lose hope at that point. We're not talking about anything like that today. Any questions on home prices? What about foreclosures? Anybody get that question? I'm going to wait until we get all these foreclosures in, and I'm going to snap them up. There's a Zillow. I've got it on my laptop. I don't have them all committed to memory. If you go to Zillow, they're doing right now every month an MSA level study of prices. And it's like zillow.com/data. And you can put in your area and they'll give you what they have. Now people are like, Zillow's great with prices. I hear that. But they're probably the best. They're random markets. One in Idaho, one in Louisiana, one in West Virginia. And there are other extenuating factors in those markets, some of those related to oil. They're not all, based on prices. But I think anything that went up dramatically is at most risk. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's that? Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Any other questions on prices? And we can do Q&A at the end here. But what about foreclosures? People are like, we're going to wait for all these foreclosures to come. We're going to snap them up. That's the number one reason there's not going to be a crash, because everybody's waiting for when they're to come. We want to buy 2 of them, This is foreclosure activity every year in this country, going all the way back to 2005. Now, the red bars are the years there were over 1 million foreclosures during the mortgage meltdown, the housing bust, whatever you want to call it. There were over 9 million people that were affected during that time in some type of deed in lieu, short sale, distress sale at that point. Now, this is very, very interesting. Stick with me on this. Ever since 2010, every year in this country, we have seen less foreclosures. Now, this is interesting because after 2008, there was legislation introduced called the Dodd-Frank Act, if you remember that, to protect the consumer, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And as a part of Dodd-Frank, the qualified mortgage came about. Anybody remember that? Or remember that? What's the basis of the qualified mortgage? The basis of the qualified mortgage is the ability to repay. It's a novel concept for if you're going to lend people money, they should have the ability to repay. Well, when people have the ability to repay, what happens? They don't default as much. If you were to ask me, really, in this piece, where would we be nationally? It'll be in a conversation soon where we need to open credit up to more people. That's the bottom line. People have opinions about that and all that, but even if you take 2020 and 2021 off the map in this picture, foreclosure has been dropping every year because we have a different borrower today. All the exotic products that were in the past are out of the market. And oh, by the way, there is one definite sign that I'll show you in just a minute that people said coming out of 2008. They said, we're going to do this differently. We're not going to refinance the house, do a cash out refi, go out and buy a jet ski and go on vacation and do whatever we want to do thinking this will never end. They've made different decisions this time. I don't know about you, most of the things I've learned in my life have been the hard way. And people learned that in 2008. They said, we're going to do it differently this time. So if we look at foreclosures in this country, as of the second quarter, 214,800 homeowners were facing possible foreclosure in the second quarter of 2022, or just 0.4% of the 58.2 million outstanding mortgages. This is 0.4%. I had to do that for myself. Now, I will tell you this. Benchmark brought me here. I was sitting there when we were talking about foreclosures with Jim McMahon, who's the president of Benchmark, probably one of the most articulate, informed people on the secondary market in the mortgage market that I know. And oh, by the way, Benchmark is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, is a servicer and holds loans as well. Yeah. So Benchmark's a servicer. So I asked Jim, what would you be okay? What would any servicer be okay with in their portfolio as a default rate at any time? Anybody know what that number is? It's about 1%. At any time, they're okay with about 1% default rate. So you make 100 loans, they're okay with one defaulting. That's what they're sort of prepared for. We're at half of that in this country. You ever turn on the news and anybody say anything like that? Remember I said the job of the news is to get you to watch more news? And oh, by the way, if you're thinking about buying a house today, you're like, everybody's about to get foreclosed on, we're gonna go snap them all up. It's not there. Next time somebody looks at this, say, I'd look at them and go, what are you talking about? I don't where's your information? They're like, well, I just kind of feel that way. I feel that way. You know what I mean? Oh, by the way, of those facing foreclosure, 195,000 of them, or 91%, had some equity built up in their homes. People do get foreclosed on with equity. That does happen. I don't know why, but it does happen. And I'm not casting down there, but if somebody's in a tough situation today, they can sell their home, pay a commission, and put some money in their pocket and get to the other side of the financial crisis they and their family are facing. Staying informed today is critical to giving great advice, because there are people out there wondering, this sure doesn't feel good. It feels like this is all about to fall apart. And when you start to dig deeper and understand it, you get a different perspective. And oh, by the way, if you look at the third quarter, anyone waiting for a huge foreclosure wave will probably be disappointed in this report from Adam Data, which, by the way, Adam Data makes their money on foreclosures. That's what they do. Foreclosure activity was flat Q1 to Q2, and starts dropped slightly in the third quarter. That's what's happening. Here was the headline to that article, by the way. Understand, anybody have somebody text them an article about the housing market? Like, what do you think of this? Says we're all gonna, whatever, go over the waterfall. Anybody ever that happen? Nobody? A couple people? Next time somebody sends you a message like that, you raise your hand first. Send them a message back and say, did you read the article?
That's true. One came out that San Diego had the fastest declining rate in the entire.
Yeah.
And it's because we went from 30% to 20%.
Yeah.
As far as increasing.
Totally. Yeah. Did you read the article? Yeah. And then that's going to eliminate 90% of them. They're not going to text you back or whatever. But the one that does, say, what's your question? Because unless it's genuinely misleading and incorrect, they're factually correct but tremendously inaccurate. You know, this is one of the things that we fight at Keeping Current Matters, is just being educated. If you wake up every day and you just read the headlines, gosh, it looks rough. We have a team of 7 people that read everything, survey everything that's ever put out, and we distill it down to these pieces. We do it for $29 a month. I'm like, if you find a better way, let me know, because we might subscribe to it. Because you have to have it in this market. There's this one little fact right here. U.S. households own $41 trillion in owner-occupied real estate. Just over $12 trillion in debt. Anybody remember the articles that came out in the last year? There was over $10 trillion in debt in this country. We've never been there before. We're all in trouble. More mortgage debt than ever before. $12 trillion in mortgage debt right now. And the remaining $29 trillion is in equity. The national LTV in this country is 29.5%. Homeowners on average, it says, had about $320,000 in equity. That's a much larger number here. Nobody's walking away from $320,000. No way. So if you've got anybody that's, I'm not saying there aren't going to be foreclosures, there will be. It will not be a business strategy like it was in 2008, where anybody here was a REO agent, short sale agent, kind of that was a strategy back then. We're not going to see the volume of it because it's just not there. And oh, by the way, if anybody has that, I mean, my message would be if you're in trouble, let's talk. We can help you sell your house today. And we can help you. Somebody going through that's not going through a good time by no stretch of the imagination. What about inventory? Inventory is rising, right? Nope. It's up over last year, up over 2020, but still very, very low compared to 2019. As of the end of last week, 38.4% below 2019, which I would say is the last normal year in real estate that we saw. So you don't have this scenario where this inventory is coming to market or that we have a tremendous amount that is driving price, because price will always be determined by supply and demand. There's no doubt that the rise in interest rates has squelched demand, but we're not seeing supply rise at the same time. Should I buy a home right now? That's my last point. Biggest question out there. We did a video on this at Keeping Current Matters a couple of weeks ago. It's been probably one of the most shared videos that we've done in a long time. Just answering the question, should I buy a home right now? Matter of fact, on Sunday, the kind of main article in Inman News is going to be on this question. And you'll see that article come out with that in Inman. But that's the biggest question right now. In anybody that's asking this question, there's two things that I would ask them back, or that I would consider if I was in your shoes answering this question. What do you believe about interest rates, and what do you believe about prices? What do you believe? That's going to help you make a decision in this market. And you can help somebody make a decision that way, right? If it is the right time for you to wait, then let's help you do that. If it is the right time for you to buy right now, but what do you believe about interest rates, and what do you believe about prices? I told you what experts are saying. We're going to go up, then we're going to go into a recession, we're going to come down. Well, what about prices? You can bring your local market expertise to that. Nationally, probably a flat market. Okay, so what's the best decision for you? But let's position the conversation with what's the alternative. This is the alternative right here. It's renting. Now, we don't have time for this today, but if you really wanted to talk about the true crisis in housing today, it's with rental. It's with rents. And I'm not saying that there are certainly landlords in this room, I get that, but rents have skyrocketed. And oh, by the way, if you can't buy, you have to go and rent now. If you're paying through the nose for rent, you can't save for a down payment, and it becomes that cycle. That's a challenge. That's a huge, huge challenge. I think right now, for the clients that you serve, staying on top of what a 2-3 bedroom apartment rents for and having that at the tip of your tongue is critically important, because they've gone up. They're going up. This is a supply and demand issue as well. But that's the alternative, right? So what do you believe about interest rates? What do you believe about prices? Oh, by the way, are you going to rent? If you're living with your parents, they're probably like, we got to get out. If you're living rent-free, then maybe you should continue to live rent-free. But the bottom line is, for most households, equity is the way they build wealth. It's a great thing about this country. Home ownership allows people to build wealth. By and large, it is the number one way that people in this country build wealth. If you are renting, if you're not owning, you don't have that opportunity. So for Benchmark, this is the third one of these that I've done. Did one on the East Coast, one in Dallas, Texas, and then we're here today. And we did a Q&A session in the first one that we did, and the question was asked of kind of all the downturns and everything that we've been through what's the one thing that you learned in that? And I thought it was a really, really good question, and I had to think about that for a while. But the one thing I would take away from every downturn, going back all the way to the mid-90s to today, is that the bottom line in real estate is that home ownership wins. Over time, home ownership wins. We're talking about 7% interest rates. We're talking about, can we get a house? Can we afford it? There have been people that have been priced out, no doubt. But buying a home wins, certainly for the financial reasons, for the non-financial reasons. You know, back in 2008, I don't know how many people were, I think we raised our hands, maybe half of us or so were in the business. Do you remember after 2008, people were kind of like, is buying a home even the American dream anymore? Everybody remember that? It's kind of like, man, they lose value. I'm not sure we want to do that. And millennials want to just rent, and they're going to do that. They're not renting, they're buying. I'm sure you know that. What happened during the pandemic was the exact opposite. People said, we want a spot. People said, we're living here, we're dining here, we're working out here, our kids are going to school here. We want our spot. Oh, by the way, we're willing to pay more for it if it has what we want, and we'll come out of pocket on that. That's been crystal clear. Back in 2008, if you bought a home, you could do 100% financing. You can't do that today. People that have bought homes that have gone above appraised value have come out of pocket on that. It's another big difference in the market. So the differences are dramatic. But this graphic here shows, if you went back 30 years, the average appreciation in this country, 290%. You can see the state of California, 319%. Depending on other states, maybe you have a home in or an interest in. The question I always ask people is, if you could go back 10 years from now and buy a home, would you do it? Most people are like, yeah, how many could I buy? How many would you let me? What makes you think 10 years from now anything's going to be any different? And I think having the facts in this market are going to be the difference maker. Because we've never lived in a world that, and this could get us onto a different topic, that is more divided than it is today. And people don't know what to believe. And if they just read the news, they just look at that, they're going to be informed the way that we know they're going to be informed. And what's the great news about technology today? We have the ability to broadcast ourselves literally on Instagram or Facebook or Zoom or YouTube or whatever and get the message out there. We got about 10 minutes? Okay. And get the message out there. That hasn't been possible before. If the pandemic would have hit in the early 90s or something, like, I don't know what we would have done, but we figured that out. Because here's the bottom line. In the absence of trustworthy, up-to-date information, real estate decisions are increasingly being driven by fear, uncertainty, and doubt. These decisions can be hugely consequential for consumers and for businesses. And I believe that with all my heart today. I'm not here telling you, hey, use all this information to try to convince somebody to do something they don't want to do. I'm not for that. I'm not for somebody buying something saying you can refinance it. You can refinance it, but you need to be able to afford what you're buying today. But if you're not making a decision because you were misinformed, I feel even worse. I want to be the educator. When Keeping Current Matters was started, it was started on a foundational quote from Dave Ramsey where Dave Ramsey said, anytime you're looking for advice with insurance, with borrowing money, with real estate, look for someone with the heart of a teacher, not the heart of a salesperson. And I think right now our job is to adopt the heart of a teacher and say, hey, you feel this way about the market, or you have these questions. Could I share this with you? Could I share that with you? One of the most powerful questions you can ask somebody today that has a strong opinion about real estate is, tell me why you feel that way. Tell me why you feel that way. Well, I read an article, or I saw somebody say something, or my uncle said something. Your uncle doesn't know what he's talking about. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. So we're going to wrap here. Got a couple minutes. Here's what I'm going to leave you with. What's your story? What's your story out in the market today? You're about to leave here. You're going to go out. You're going to see people. What's your story? Because there are definitely stories being told out there. We started off with this kind of story, way of thinking. But what's your story? There's one story that's like, I don't know, we're going to have to wait and see. That's one story that's out in the market right now. There's also a story where I can say, I'm going to be the guide for you. I'm going to show you what experts are saying. Nobody's got a crystal ball. Let me just be clear, nobody has a crystal ball. But there's a difference between expert advice and perfect advice. Nobody in this world can give you perfect advice on anything. I'll give you an example. Heaven forbid you end up in a situation and you have to go to the doctor. What's the doctor going to do? They're going to look at you. They're going to say, what are your symptoms? What's going on? All right, here's what we're going to prescribe to you. Here's the medication we're going to give you. Here's what we're going to do. Now I want you to do this. I want you to come back in 30 or 45 days. And what are they going to do? You're going to sit down in 30 or 45 days and they're going to say, here's what we now see. Here's what we're going to do. And they're going to give you their expert advice. Can't give you perfect advice. An attorney can't give you perfect advice. They can give you their expert advice. Our job today is to be the expert, okay? I'll wrap on that. I want to just say thank you to Benchmark for bringing me here. It is an honor to be with you, to just experience the energy of this meeting. It's special, and I want you to know that. It's special to be in a place like this. I get a chance to do this from time to time, and not everywhere has this energy, okay? My advice to you is to stay connected. Watch what we do. Stay connected to Benchmark because we'll bring it to you, and I am grateful for the opportunity to share. Okay? Thank you.